Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, she'akol niyeh b'dvaro. Amen. Okay, we are on 15b4, I believe. Yeah, 15b4. Let's begin. Vayisaper lahem Haman et kevod oshro v'rov banav. We're going to back up just a bit, where we learn that Haman explained to them. He told over to his wife and his many children. He told them and his close advisors about his great wealth and his many children, and he's setting up basically a narrative, saying, "Look, I have so much going for me in my life. I'm so blessed. I have all of this." And all of this is worthless to me when I consider the fact that Mordechai does not bow to me. And we explained the reason for that in a previous class was that since Mordechai was the master of Haman, Haman correctly said, "Mashikana Eved Kana Rabo, whatever I'll acquire will belong to him. So who cares how much I have? Ultimately, it's going to be his. The wealth is his. The children of a slave, who do they belong to?
The master.
The master. So if that's the case, Rov Banav, where do they go? Doesn't matter how many kids he has. So sometimes also I feel like, we skin a cat, but we skin it from both directions. So like as an example, we're learning that Haman is such a horrible person because he has everything, and look, he's complaining about one thing. Yeah, but according to this Gemara, that one thing is the everything. So you can't wail on him on one side and then wail on him on the other side. It's not like that's an illogical thing. That's actually a pretty logical thing. All right, let's carry on. We're going to come back to that when in a little bit, that idea of that we just mentioned. Let's carry on. What does it mean that he had Rov Banav, many sons? Amar Rav. Rav said, Lamed. He had 30. Asara metu, v'asara nitlu, v'asara mechazrin el pitachim. We know that 10 of them were hung. That we know from the Megillah. Then the Gemara tells us that another 10 of them died. And then the Gemara tells us another 10 of them are going around mechazrin el pitachim. Where do we learn that from? The third group. I understand that they would have killed the children of Haman. That makes sense to me. But where do we know that there's 10 of them that are poor? The Gemara brings a proof. Those that go around collecting money by door to door, shiv'im havia. Actually, it was 70, which gives us a total number of 90. Tichtiv shiv'im balechem niskeru. Sive'im balechem niskeru. So we're reading that same word in two different ways. Sive'im balechem niskeru means, in order to be full, they were hired out for bread. So in other words, they needed to work for their bread. What do they say? Sing for your supper. They need to work for their bread. But the word sive'im, which means to be full, is also the same word as shiv'im, which means 70. So 70 were working for bread. Don't read it full, rather 70. Now, what's interesting is, we talk about the children of Haman dying. So dying, I get. Hung, I get. What is walking around collecting money around for? What does that look like? The Gemara answers in another place. The Gemara says, Arba'a chashuvim kamet. There are 4 people that are considered by Chazal to be like as if they are dead. Mitzorah, okay, Gatzarat, and lo banim, person doesn't have any children. One of them is ani, a poor person, and suma, a person who's blind. So the third of the 4 is ani, is a person who is very poor. So it was nitkayem in them that they were dead by the fact that they were that poor. You understand? That they had to collect. And what were they collecting for? Not for a wedding or for a car or for something extra, just plain bread. Okay? Last piece is that in this Anik Chashuv Kemet is that there's a beautiful, I would say, kind of karmic circularity in this idea. Can you tell me why? Anyone want to hazard a guess? in the beginning of time, there's also a relationship between Am Yisrael and Amalek. When Yaakov goes running away from Esav, Amalek is sent, Eliphaz is sent by his grandfather. He says, by his father Esav, go catch Yaakov and kill him. But Yaakov studied Torah with Eliphaz, so they were very close. So he came to him and he said, what should I do? My father told me to kill you. I have to listen to my father. Kibud Avayim was the biggest mitzvah that Esav had, correct? So he said, I can't not listen to my father. So Yaakov Avinu told him, take all my money, and then I will be considered as if I'm dead. Eliphaz takes all the money from Yaakov. That makes him be considered as if he's dead. And then what happens over here? Haman has 10 sons that get killed. Another 10 sons that get killed. The Chachamim over here are telling us that there's 70 more sons, or the first opinion, 10 more sons, that get a death which is called death, but not death. Perhaps that is an payback for the fact that once upon a time, Eliphaz allowed Yaakov to use the Ani Chashuv Kemet, and now his grandchildren are being saved. Hadush Be'ezrat Hashem. Okay, let's carry on. Gemara says, so we've got Virami Bar Abba, Rabbi Bar Abba says, Kulan Matayim Shmonayabu. All of the, how many of the children did he have? He had 208. Shene'ema, Virov Banav, as it says, he told them about Osro, his wealth, the Rov Banav. And Rov Banav is exactly 208. Why? Vav is 6, Resh is 200, Bet is 2. So Virov Banav is exactly 208. The Gemara says, what are you talking about? Virov with a Vav, okay? So if you have no Cholem, what do you have instead? You have the Vav in between the Resh and the Bet. So that gives you 2 Vavs. So 6 plus 200. Plus 6 plus 2 gives you 214. Virov Gematria Matan V'arbesar Havu. The Gemara says, Amar Rav Nachman Bar Yitzchak. Rav Nachman Bar Yitzchak answers, Virov Ktiv. But in the Pasuk, it doesn't say it with an extra Vav. It says it Virav as is. And that gives us 208. Now, I always had one question on this, okay? And that is, it's an interesting gematria that the Gemara is using here. Let me tell you why. If you told me that there was a secret trapdoor telling us the amount of Haman's children from this word Virov, you know how many children I would have guessed he had?
From this?
Yeah. Not 214, also not 208. I would have guessed 202. Why? Because the Vav is in the narrative. We talked about his wealth, and Rov Banav, the 202 kids. So,
can it say?
Good.
I could say. I guess it can't. So to have it without the Vav and just say Rov Banav, but it really you'd lose the flow of the.
You'd lose the flow of the narrative.
Yeah.
So the alternate way would have been to write Rov with an extra Vav in it, and then learn that the first Vav doesn't count because that's the and part of the word. Anyway, I just found that interesting in the Gemara, and maybe that's a proof that anytime you have a Gematria where the word Vav is actually employed in the lexicon, in the syntax of the Pasuk, you would still include that in the Gematria of the word that you're using. Gemara continues. Amar Rav Nachman Bar Yitzchak. Rav Nachman Bar Yitzchak explained Virov. Virov. It actually doesn't say it that way. It says it Virav. Now the question is, okay, so why? Why does it say it that way? Simple answer is because there actually was 208 kids. It almost sounds like from the Gemara's question that the way it should have been written is Rov with a Vav.
I mean, it should have been written. It was written that way.
Right. So it's a strange question. The Gemara is asking a question and it didn't know how it was written.
Right. Doesn't make sense.
Doesn't make sense. So I think what the Gemara is, the way I'm understanding the Gemara, right, is that it's true that that's how it would be read without the vowels, and it would be rov with that vav without the vowels. What we're trying to ask a question is, if you could write it in the Megillah in a way where you couldn't make a mistake, okay?
Put the vav.
You would put the vav. Why do you choose to say virov without the vav? You could write it with a cholim, true, but the Gemara is actually
saying 208.
Right, I understand. So,
Specific
so it
number.
had, and that's what the Gemara Drasha is. It had to be written this way. I think there's another element here as well. The Gemara did not want you to write Virov Banav that way, because then you could make a mistake. What mistake could you make?
214.
No, Virav Banav.
Oh, and they fought.
No, that could be what it means. But he told them that Osro, his wealth, Virav Banav, and the leaders, the heads, right? The like Rav, like a rabbi, right, is the leader, right? So it could have meant that he was talking not about all of his children, but about the choicest of his children. So that would be avoided if you added the vav. Okay, let's continue. That night, we read the pasuk out loud. On that night, the sleep of the king was disturbed. Every time we find the word Hamelech in the Megillah, we say that it can be also alternately read as Hakadosh Baruch Hu. So Reb Tanchum explains, Nadash Shnat HaMelech means that God in the heavens' sleep was disturbed. The Chachamim explain, no, it means both those above and those below. So what does it mean? What's that referring to? It's referring to the Malachim and Achashverosh. So in other words, both the Malachim were not sleeping and the what's it called? And the angels. Now I have one question for you. There's a pasuk that we all know. Hine lo yanum velo yishan shomer Yisrael. What does that mean? The protector of Israel
Doesn't sleep.
neither slumbers nor sleeps. So what does it mean on that night the sleep of the king was disturbed? It's a little strange. He doesn't ever sleep. So the Gemara is basically using the word sleep as an allusion, as a euphemism to say that when it seems to us that we're being left alone, we're left to the worst devices of our enemies, it comes across as if HaKadosh Baruch Hu was sleeping, right? And in those moments, what would change if we would get a radical departure from that norm? Then that would feel like a Nadash Shnat HaMelech. Okay, so the Gemara is telling us that it was on that night. It was evidently, it was evident that the sleep of the king, that what we had thought was the sleeping king, was not so, because a lot of things conflate on that night to change the course of Jewish history. Rava Amar Shnat HaMelech Achashverosh Mamash. It means specifically the king of Achashverosh. Naflale Milta B'Da'ateh. So what does it mean? It's trying to communicate it like a specific element of disturbance of sleep. An idea fell into his head and he could not shake it. Amar Mai de Kaman Dezimti Esther Haman. I don't understand. What happened that Esther invited Haman? I can't believe it. She's making a private party and she wants only Haman to be there, right? Dilma etzak ashakli ilave. Maybe they're coming up with some sort of a dastardly plan to dahu gavra miktale in order to kill that man, i.e. me. Hadar amar ihachi lo hava gavra derachimli. How could that be? If there's such a plot between my own queen and Haman, then someone, one of the courtiers, one of the servants, one of the ministers, someone had to get wind of this palace intrigue. There had to be someone hiding behind curtains somewhere hearing this information. How come it didn't come back my way? And the Gemara answers, why is no one having pity on me? How come no one likes me to tell me? He said, Dilma ika inish de avid bitivuta velo perate. Maybe what's actually taking place over here is that there's someone who did me a favor, who saved my life, and I never rewarded them properly. And the word is out that Achashverosh does not reward for good information.
It's fascinating.
Fascinating, right?
All in his head.
All in his head.
It's amazing.
Not only that, listen to this. Remember, so let's say you're the servant of the king, and the king is not handing out lollipops if you save him. So now you're not going to be loyal to the king? You know what the answer is? In the mutinous life of in the mutinous half-life of a king in these eras, all through the Middle Ages, mutinies, rebellions, coups were every Monday and Tuesday, and Thursday, depending on if it's 11, 12, or 13. It was, right? All the time this happened. you had to ask yourself as a serf, as a second, third, fourth, fifth, whatever in command, if you tell the king and the king doesn't have your back, then the other guy, when he takes over, will kill you. So if, let's say, Haman is taking over, and Achashverosh doesn't protect the people that come to him, then what's going to happen? I'm going to go to Achashverosh, Achashverosh is going to give me a hug, and then Haman will kill me. Or people who feel like Haman will kill me. So what we're talking about over here is not just some element of like a favor, a reward, but I think also there's an element here of royal protection given to effectively a whistleblower. It's very topical, isn't it? It's topical.
It's in the king's interest.
It's in the whistleblower. It's in the king's, on a rebellion.
He also probably thinks that if he doesn't reward this guy, nobody else is going to come and tell me that there's a plot.
Exactly. Now you understand how crazy it is that he's having these thoughts and he can't sleep. Right? Velo perati. Mishum hachi mimnai inshi. This is why people are not saying, Velo megalili, when they're not telling me. Miad vayomer lahavi et sefer zechronot divrei hayamim. So for the first time we understand why randomly it seemed that Achashverosh asks in the middle of the night to bring him the book of memories, right, of everything that happened to him in the past. Up until this point, you're looking at this and you're wondering, why is he doing this? Let him take melatonin. What's he doing? The answer is, my friends, he asked for it specifically to go through to see if there was someone who did not have a reward for having helped the king. And he said, bring me the books, and they should be read in front of the king. Now the Gemara is picking up on something very interesting. They were read by themselves. The person who was in charge did not want to read the entry with regards to Mordechai. We'll see why in a minute. But he did not want to read it. So what happened? This piece of information that God had set up by creating this paranoia in Achashverosh's brain, right, is now not going to come to fruition. It's not going to see the light of day. It starts being read by itself. By the way, we have a photocopy of this exact story when it talks about the books of the living and the dead in Shamayim on the days of judgment, Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur. It says that all the person's deeds are written in the book, right? B'sefer Nichtavim. Ume'elav, and by itself and of its own accord, it is read out in the heavenly court. The Gemara continues, and it was found written. Strange line, right? And it was found written.
As if no one wrote it?
Katav mibayele. It should say, it was found, right? A writing. What does it mean? It was found written. The Gemara answers, Milamed. This is wild. Sheshimshai mochek. Shimshai was the king's scribe, actually for generations. He was a generational scribe. He's there before Achashverosh, he's there during Achashverosh, and he's there also after Achashverosh. Okay? So Shimshai mochek, he's erasing the story. The Gabriel kotev, and the angel Gabriel is rewriting it. Now, I always looked at this Gemara, and I noticed it does not say Sheshimshai machak. What does machak mean? Machak means he erased. Mochek means he is erasing. It means he kept doing it. And every time it's erasing, Gabriel's rewriting it.
Wow.
Cycle. And by the way, this family has experience with this. Remember, the writing on the wall. They're trying to erase it. They can't erase it. There's a hand, a disembodied hand writing on the wall by Belshazzar. Okay? The Gemara continues. So that's why it says, Vayimatzeh Katuv. Amar Rabbi Yassi. Rabbi Yassi says, Darash Rav Shila ish kfar Timrata. Rav Shila, the man from Timrata, from that city.
I'm sorry, Robert, but who wrote, did this guy, Shimshi, whatever, did he write it originally when it happened?
Yeah.
Or are we to take that?
No. We understand that it was written by the king's scribe,
Shimshai.
Shimshai, initially.
But why would he write
Why
it
would
if
you
he was
write it
erasing?
initially to then erase it later?
Remember the timeline. The Gezerah against Mordechai and the Jewish people comes after Mordechai heard the story with Bigtan Vateresh.
Got it.
So at that point, there's no blood feud between his father and Mordechai.
Shimshai? What do you mean, father?
Shimshai is the son of Haman.
You didn't say that.
I didn't hear that. When did you say that? What do you mean?
Didn't happen while you were in the coffee.
You just said that when I went there.
No, I did not. That was a reveal.
Oh.
That was a reveal.
That's a major item.
So Shimshai, why is Shimshai erasing it? This is the son of Haman. Okay? So Shimshai is the son of Haman. He's erasing, as he keeps erasing, he keeps coming back. But in the first place, that's why I thought you were asking why you write it in the first place.
I did ask.
The answer is
Because before the Gezerah.
before the Gezerah. Okay?
But it all comes down to the fact that he's Haman's son. That answers a lot of the questions.
Yes. Okay? The Gemara says, Katav shelemata shel zuchutan sheyisrael erimchak. If a ktav from down here on earth, which is written towards the positive elements of the Jewish people, Avi.
I feel uncomfortable.
Avi. Avi. Avi.
I understand. But
Avi.
I don't say anything. I'm just checking. I don't want to say anything.
Okay.
We're going on video.
Katav Shelmata Shel Zchutan Sheyisrael Erimchak. So if you have a writing down here on earth, which is not gonna, it can't become erased, even if someone repeatedly tries. Katav Shelemala Lo Kol Sheken. If there's a decree in Shamayim that something should happen, you can be sure that it will not become erased by itself. So this is a kind of an encouraging idea on the one hand, and on the one hand, a very scary idea. In other words, if HaKadosh Baruch Hu has a gezerah on someone, whether it's positive or it's negative, don't just assume that that gezerah is going to disappear. Because look, even a writing that was here on earth, if it was meant to stay, no matter how many times you try and erase it, it's not getting erased. Says the Gemara. Now, against Shimshai's best efforts to erase it, against his unwillingness to read it, it's rewritten and it's read out by itself. Says the Gemara, so what happened? The Gemara answers, Lo naaseh imo davar. Nothing happened to him. Amar Rava says, Lo mnei sho'avim Mordechai. Not because Mordechai, right? Why they tell the king, no, nothing happened to him, right? Makes it sound like they're on Mordechai's side. Gemara answers, listen carefully, they hated Haman. They also did not have any love for Mordechai. So what did they say? They said it in a way which would minimize what Achashverosh would give him. Nona said, no, a thing wasn't done for him.
They low-keyed it.
Nothing was done, i.e., the bar for doing anything is this high. So, I don't know, send them some flowers. All right. Gemara continues. Haman comes in now. The crazy, you know what I always loved?
Yeah.
Haman is happy as Larry. His wife and his advisor giving him this advice, go kill Mordechai. Okay? You see the time, how important timing is. If he comes to Achashverosh half hour earlier, no problem. The whole saga with Mordechai doesn't happen. Exactly when he comes, Achashverosh has this thought that Haman wants to kill him, that he's conspiring with Esther. He has this thought that there must be someone who should have told him, who doesn't feel like they were rewarded.
Right.
Look at what he's stepping into with this big smile on his face. King, I have an amazing idea.
There's one cop here.
Yeah,
Shimshai was the guy who was erasing it.
correct.
Presumably, he was right there when Achashverosh was reading it.
Where it was read by
when
itself.
It was read, when
Yeah.
it was being read by itself, whatever, right?
Yes.
Why would Haman be shocked when Achashverosh says, I want to do this for the person who did this? He thought it was himself.
So Haman,
Shimshai should have told him.
Haman walks into the situation after this has already happened.
Isn't Shimshai there?
No. Why? Because whenever you have a meeting of that high of a level, they take give me the room. Everyone else leaves. Shimshai is a low. Haman is second to the king. All right. Now, hechin lo. So listen to this. So Mordechai comes in. So Haman comes in, and he wants to tell him to hang Mordechai on the tree asher hechin lo, that he prepared for him. Tana, we learned hechin lo hechin. He prepared it for himself. So hechin lo, the word lo is what's called a hanging modifier, because there's two subjects in the sentence, Haman and Mordechai. So Haman had come to say to the king about the tree that he had prepared for him. Who's for him? Says the Tanah, that left open because Haman was actually prepared that tree for himself. Gemara continues. So Achashverosh turns to Haman and he says, what do you think I should do? How should I reward someone that's been very, very loyal to me? Now, according to what we understand, right? According to what we understand, Achashverosh is really playing Haman here. It's not just that Achashverosh is asking Haman a random question, and he happened to forget to mention that it was Mordechai. And then Haman happened to think that they were talking about him.
Did he do that because
Achashverosh is specifically, remember, he thinks Haman is conspiring against him. Right. He thinks no one's telling him. He thinks the reason no one's telling him is because he's not rewarding the people that do things for him. So what does he do? He sets really a trap for Haman that will indicate whether Haman is really trying to usurp the throne for himself. And Haman steps right into the trap, fails miserably, and sets off every red flag in Achashverosh's mind. Because listen how it goes. So what does he tell him? He tells him, get the king's horse, and the king's clothes, and the king's crown, and put it on the head of this guy. Achashverosh knows that Haman thinks it's him. What does he suspect Haman of? Having designs on the throne. What does he ask him for? Haman, Achashverosh knows Haman thinks he's talking about him. Right. What does Haman ask for?
Everything.
But specifically,
the crown,
the king's horse, the king's clothes. So literally Haman, not realizing, immediately gives Achashverosh every bit to feed the paranoia that his intention is to take the king, is to take the kingdom. So what does he say? Do for Mordechai. Exactly what you just told me, do for Mordechai. Amale, Haman is now bifledge. Shu Mordechai, which one? Manu Mordechai. Mordechai Stein, Mordechai Levi, Mordechai Cohen. Who? Amale HaYehudi, the Jew. Amale, wait, there's a lot of Jews called Mordechai. Tuva Mordechai Ikaba Yehudai. There's lots of Jews called Mordechai. Amale Ayoshev B'Sha'ar HaMelech. No, there's only one that sits at the gate of the king always. Amale Sagele Bechad Diskarta. Inami Bechad Nara. Really, Your Majesty, it's too much for this Aige. You should give him taxes from one river or from one city, right? That's enough. Amaleh hanami have. That's a fantastic idea. Give that to him too. Wow. Achashverosh is now toying with Haman. He's torturing him on purpose. Give him that too. Al tapil davar mikol asher dibarta. Don't let one thing slide from everything that you said. Make sure that you do your suggestions and those two suggestions as well, so you can collect the taxes.
I thought Achashverosh is kind of a dib. Like, when you read that, it's like, oh, and don't skip out an item. Like, he's telling him, like, make sure you do everything and there's no oversight or anything in the kingdom. It's like, seems... And
now you see that the Gemara is telling you that Achashverosh was referring to the things that were over and above what Haman had first suggested. And so, in other words, don't think that if you did those, you could lose some of those. Do those and those in their entirety. At that point, Haman understood, you should better not say anything, right? Because anything else he's going to say that too. Vayikach Haman et halevush et hasus. Haman takes the clothing and the horse. He found the little Rabbanim are sitting together with Mordechai. He's teaching them the halachot of kimitza. You should know this. Halachot of kimitza is you take your hand, you put it into the flour. The 3 middle fingers is the kometz, and you use your pinky and your thumb to even out the amount, and that way you have only the flour that's between the 3 fingers. That's kometz for a mincha. So he's teaching them how to do it. When he saw that Haman is coming, and he's coming towards him, and he's got the king's horse, he's thinking to himself, he's terrified. This guy is coming now with one horse, he's probably going to take me to be killed. Run away, so you should not be also singed, right? Scarred, burned from his from the coals, from the burning coal that he is. Immediately, Mordechai wrapped his talit around him. Remember, at this point, they are fasting. So not only is he wearing a talit, what else is Mordechai wearing? Sackcloth, exactly, sackcloth. So he wraps himself in the sackcloth and in the ashes and in the talit, and he starts to pray, literally to pray for his life, as he sees Haman walking towards him on the horizon. Ata Haman, v'yativ lekamayu. Haman came and he sat there in front of them. It sounds like from the Gemara, from the word kamayu, that the rabbis did not leave. Because if it was only Mordechai left by the time he got there, would say, v'yativ le kameh. Kameh is in front of him. Kamayu was in front of them. Ve'orich ad salik Mordechai letzluteh. He waited until Mordechai finished all the tefillot. Amar lahu b'may askitu. He said to them, here you see the proof. He said to the Talmidim, what did you just learn with Mordechai before we got up to pray? They told him as much. Someone would bring a mincha. He would bring a full kometz, the suta of flour, mitkaperle, and he would find kapara through the kometz of the mincha. Amalahu ata mile kumtze kimcha diedchu. This little bit of flour that you would have in your hand, vidachi asara alfe kikare kaspadidi. It pushed off. It was more powerful than the 10,000 talents of silver, like we said, that I gave to Achashverosh. Amale Mordechai. Now here's this. Rasha Eved shekana nechasim Eved lemi nechasim lemi. Since that money was mine, you gave away that money. And what he's telling him, see, what does he mean to say? This is a hard thing to understand.
This is very courageous.
Right? Hard thing to say. Well, Mordechai understood also that for Haman to say, so let's take this in order. First of all, what does Mordechai say? Mordechai says Rasha, an Eved that acquires property or things. Eved lemi unechasim lemi. To who belongs the servant and to who belongs the nechasim, all the property. So what is Mordechai saying?
Saying you offered my money to kill me and my people.
So all that belongs to me.
Right.
It sounds like an interesting thing for Mordechai to say. Also, the language, Rasha. What is he saying here? Eved lemi, nechasim lemi. So I think that what Mordechai was saying to Haman is dib. It's not that our flour is better than your silver. All of this, no, is his. Our flour is God's because we are his Eved. Your silver is mine, but my silver is his. So it's not my silver, your silver versus our flour. Neither the silver nor the flour belongs to us, either of us. And in recognizing that we are avadim to Hashem, and bringing that sacrifice to our true master, what do? We actually returned the object that was divorced from its master to its master. You gave it back to the wrong person. That's the chidush that I understand in the Gemara what Mordechai was telling. What Mordechai was telling Haman. Evet shekana nechasim, and that's why he uses a broader statement.
So he wasn't specifically referring to Haman?
He was
explaining comments, basically?
He was also, but he was using the opportunity to say to Haman, you think it's our comments versus your silver. It's not your silver because your silver is my silver, but it's also not our comments because we are Evet to Hashem. So the comments belongs to God. You have the equation wrong. And that's why our comments won out, because we were actually able to identify to whom really does belong the nechasim. Amale kum levush. He said, Haman says to Mordechai, get up, get dressed, hani mani, with these clothes, uruchov haisusia, and ride upon this horse. Debaile malka, because the king has asked for you to do it. Amale lo yachilna ad da'ilna lebe bane ve'eshko lemazaya. He said to him, how could I put on the king's clothes? I'm filthy, I haven't had a bath, I haven't had a haircut, right? He's toying with Haman. How could I use the king's clothing if I'm dirty, if I haven't had a haircut? Shadra Esther ve'asartinu lekuli bnei bani ulekuli umane. Meanwhile, they got the word to Esther about how things were going down. She puts out a proclamation. She shuts down all the bathhouses and sends home all the people running the bathhouses in Shushan. So what happens now? He's got to take him to his own personal bathhouse, and he's got to be his own shamosh to bathe him, to clean him, to cut his hair. So he brought him himself into his own and he's bathing now Mordechai. And Haman has to go now and bring scissors from his own house, because all the attendants in the bathhouses, they used to also have hair cutting in the bathhouses, was also part of the service in the spa yani. While he's doing it, Haman he's almost swooning. He's losing it. He's fainting. He can't believe it. He's screaming. He's groaning. How can it be that he was so powerful 2 minutes ago, and now he's a barber? Amaleh, Mordechai asks Haman, sharpens the knife. Amaika mitnahat. Why are you groaning? Why are you moaning? Why are you fainting? Amaleh gavrit havichashiv lemalka mikulu rav ravoni. The person that was stronger, that was more important to the king than any one of the ministers, any one of the kings, of the princes. Now he's a person who's running a bathhouse, v'sapar, and a barber. Mordechai said to him, wicked one, weren't you the barber? I thought I remembered you being the barber in Kfar Kartzum all those years ago. Tana. Haman sapar shel Kfar Kartzum haya 22 shana. 22 years Haman was the barber in Kartzum before he rose to power, and Mordechai, knowing that, says to Haman, stop forgetting where you come from. I know that this is not something which is foreign to you. Bata de Shaklinu, after he took him, and he cut his hair, the Shaklinu the Messiah lavshinu the mane. So he cut his hair, he dressed him in the clothes. Amale, sak, urchav. Okay, get up on the horse. Amale lo yachilna. He says, I can't get up on the horse. I've been fasting these 3 days. I can't get up on the horse. Gachin v'salik. Haman bent down so that Mordechai could step on his back to get on top of the king. He salik ba'atbe. He kicks him. Yeah. Amale lo ketiv lahu. Haman says to him, doesn't it say in your Torah, when your enemies fall, you shouldn't rejoice? I'm here now. You're killing me. You're stepping on me. You're making fun of me. That's between another Jew. You see another Jew falling, you shouldn't rejoice. With you, When it comes to someone like you, you should stand on their high places. Now, what's interesting here is that we actually found that this is not necessarily 100% as straightforward as one might think. Because the Gemara seems to say that Mordechai is saying that, yeah, when someone else falls, if they're not Jewish, you rejoice. But we already had the Gemara, where the Gemara says that when the Egyptians drowned in the ocean, and the angels wanted to sing Shirah, Hashem said to them, Ma'aseh yadai tovim bayam, my creations are drowning in the sea. V'atem orim Shirah, you're saying, you're rejoicing. You can't do that. Okay? He told the angels. It's also one of the reasons why we don't say Shirah at night on Shiri Shel Pesach. So if that's the case, so why would Mordechai over here say that that's only B'Yisrael, but B'didchu, that's not the case? So I think what the Gemara is saying over here is not Aval be'ovdei kochavim, but by non-Jews. He says B'didchu. With a person like you, with a Rasha, with an anti-Semite, whose intention is to destroy the Jewish person, in that person, on that person, we say, you step on their hard places. Now, one of the things which I think is curious about this, because you used a very interesting word, Mars. You said, wow, that's brave. Guy's life is in your hand. You're getting smart with him? So the answer is that Mordechai and Haman both understood that there was an element here of mazal. Right? They understood that. And look what happened. After this finishes, he comes home and he tells his advisors and his astrologers and his wife Zeresh what happened. And they said, Im mizera haYehudim. This guy's a Jew that you began to fall in front of him, you're going to fall all the way.
The story's over at this point.
Sorry?
The story is over at this point.
So I want to share something I think is beautiful. When Haman's great-great-grandfather, Esav, and Yaakov are vying for the blessings of power in this world, v'yiten lecha Elokim. So Yaakov gets the bracha. Esav comes and says, you only have one bracha, what about me? What does Yaakov say? What does Yitzchak say to him? He says, when your brother falls, okay, when he loses his level, right, ufarakta ulo me'alecha, you'll throw his yoke off and you'll rise. What does that mean? As we already saw in the Gemara, that Esav and Yaakov are like a seesaw. So the Gemara said, if someone tells you that Yerushalayim and Caesarea are both flourishing, you know he's a liar. If he tells you Yerushalayim and Caesarea are both destroyed, you know he's a liar. If he tells you that either Jerusalem is flourishing and Caesarea is destroyed, or Caesarea is flourishing, and Caesarea comes from the word Caesar, which is the Roman Caesar, that was the descendants of Edom, of Esav. If he tells you Caesarea is flourishing and Jerusalem is destroyed, then you know they're telling the truth. So there's a seesaw. And Mordechai understood that up until that point, the Jews were here, right? And Haman was here. So what's Mordechai trying to do in this moment of Mazal? He's trying to push the seesaw. So the lower he can get Haman, the more they can change the narrative.
Interesting.
Okay? And I think perhaps that's also what's hidden here in the word, Ve'ata al bamotemo tidroch. It's a strange expression. You should tread on their high places. It's not just saying step on them. It's saying that when they are high, the only way to get at the switch is you got to get to that height and actually literally stomp on top of it. And what Mordechai is doing when he steps on his back is a literal and a figurative way of flipping the script. Okay? Let's end with this last piece from this journey. He said, read before him, such shall be done to the man that the king wishes to honor. When he's walking down the street of a house of Haman, his daughter is on the roof, and she sees this procession coming in front of the house. Can't see clearly, but she sees a man, happy, proud, everyone's cheering on the horse, and she sees a man low, bending in front, leading the horse. Sevara hai derachiv avua. She thinks the one that's riding is her father. Who's pulling the horse? Obviously, Mordechai. Shakla atzitza debet takiseh. She took the sewage system. Remember, they didn't have proper flowing sewage, so they had pot. They had a sewage bucket. She's gone to the bathroom. She's pooped in this pot. She takes the pot itself, atzitza debet takiseh, and she dumps it aresha de'avua on top of the head of the person who's leading the horse. By the way, first of all, LeBron James. She chucks a chamber pot of poop from a roof, manages to hit only the guy in the front, not the guy on the horse. That is some serious long three range. This is Dame Lillard vibes. Okay? On the head of her father. At that point, Haman looks up to see who's done this to him. And the daughter sees that it's her father. She sees it's him. He sees it's her. She falls off the roof of the house in shock, and she dies. And that's what it means when it says, and Mordechai returned to the king's gate. And the end of that pasuk says, Haman nitchaf el beto. Haman goes back to his house. Evel v'chafui rosh. Evel literally means mourning. Normally you read that pasuk and you think, okay, he's mourning the embarrassment. But actually we're learning, no. Evel literally means in mourning. V'chafui rosh. And he is covered of his head. And what does it mean his head is covered? His head is covered with the result of his daughter's chamber pot. Vayashov Mordechai l'sha'ar hamelech that Haman nitchaf v'chavui rosh amarav sheshet sheshav v'sakol ta'anito. What does it mean that Mordechai returned to the gate? Immediately after this, what did Mordechai do?
Put on the sackcloth.
He took off the king's clothes. He didn't go celebrate party like it's 1999. He returns to the sackcloth and ashes. V'Haman nitchaf el beto el v'chavui rosh. Avel al bito, mourning for his daughter, and his head covered because of what had happened to him. Now, what's interesting is that I think Mordechai is particularly praiseworthy for this. You know, a lot of times a person, in the flipping of the script, you have a situation between two partners, and it goes one way. All of a sudden, the court case kind of breaks, and it looks like the other guy's winning, and then the guy, he celebrates prematurely. He goes out for dinner, he goes, buys himself a thing, in anticipation of the case going his way. And then what happens a day later, they find out that evidence is inadmissible. Or they find out that there's another piece of evidence that contradicts this. Or they find out whatever. Mordechai does not want to celebrate prematurely. So even though he's got all the signs that Haman's on the descent, what does he do? In order to not have the pride, he goes back to sacrifice. Now I want to add one last piece on this. We've explained this many, many times, and if Stanley was here with us, he would say it right now. We say specifically about this, we say that a person who is lev nishbar v'nitke, Elohim lo tivzeh. What does that mean? God chooses the brokenhearted. God always backs the underdogs. Friend here. God always backs the underdog. Do you know that?
Yes.
So you never want to put someone down, because then the underdog is now, Hashem always backs the Hazik case. He has in his heart for the guy that's downtrodden. This guy now just lost his daughter, Haman. He's covered in poop, okay? The guy is down in dumps. Mordechai is terrified that will now bring HaKadosh Baruch Hu to have, in his infinite mercy, Rachmanut on Haman. So what does Haman do? What does Mordechai do? He says, I'm also wearing sackcloth. I'm also wearing ashes. I am not yet not the underdog as well. Right. And that's not only the lack of pride, but also Mordechai is being very careful to play the game correctly in Shamayim. Baruch Adonai Le'olam. Amen v'amen.